It is now my honor to introduce our distinguished keynote speaker, Rabbi Dr. David Fox Sandmel. Rabbi Sandmel is the immediate past chair of the International Jewish Committee for Interreligious Consultations, the consortium of Jewish organizations that is the official Jewish dialogue partner of the Vatican, the World Council of Churches, and the Ecumenical Patriarch of the Orthodox Churches. From 2014 till 2022, he also served as senior advisor on interreligious affairs at ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. From 2002 until 2014, he held the Crown Ryan Chair of Jewish Studies at the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, and he has also served as the senior advisor on interreligious affairs to the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. Rabbi Sandmel is the founding rabbi of Congregation Bet Ha'am in Portland, Maine, and has served congregations in both Cleveland and Chicago. Rabbi Sandmel lectures and publishes widely on contemporary issues in Jewish-Christian relations, Jewish-Muslim relations, religion in contemporary society, and the foundations of Judaism and Christianity in antiquity. He contributed the commentary on 1 Thessalonians to the Jewish Annotated New Testament, and he is also the co-editor of Christianity in Jewish Terms, to which he has also contributed an essay. In addition, he is the lead editor of Irreconcilable Differences, a learning resource for Jews and Christians, a study and discussion guide that focuses on core theological issues on the boundary between Judaism and Christianity. And those are three fantastic books. That's not written here, but I wanted to say. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rabbi Dr. David Fox Sandmel. Thank you.
Good evening. At this moment, I don't think I can really start without acknowledging the time that we find ourselves in and just how difficult it is. It's already been mentioned several times, and I deeply appreciate, Bishop, your remarks. I think the Jewish community, not just in Israel but around the world, is in deep pain. We are, and I don't use this word lightly, traumatized, and we are fearful. We're fearful about what's going to happen in Israel. We're also fearful about what's happening in our own communities here in the United States. We've seen in England and in Germany. These are very frightening times. And it would be remiss of me not to mention that these are, of course, frightening times for others in the region around Israel, not just Jews, but Palestinians as well. One of the things that means so much at this time is the solidarity that the Jewish community has received from so many of our friends and neighbors. And again, Bishop, the remarks that you made, the remarks that have come from Pope Francis. I note the words of Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa of Jerusalem, who made an offer to exchange himself for all of the hostages. You know, this is significant. I feel powerless at this moment, but the solidarity of friends, and in this setting, I would say our friends in the Catholic community, is extraordinarily meaningful. Wow. So I may be getting a little bit ahead of the order here, but I'm going to say thank you for this honor. I know it's customary, perhaps cliched, for honorees to say that they are humbled. When I look at the list of those who've received this award in the past, I'm reminded of the Sesame Street routine. 3 of these things belong together. To join the ranks of people like Jan Karski and scholars from whom I have learned so much is indeed humbling, but it is also extremely gratifying. I want to thank St. Leo University's Center of Catholic Jewish Studies, its Scholarly Advisory Board, its director, Dr. Matthew Tapey, Professor David Maayan, and of course, my colleague and friend, Jim Rudin. I spoke to Jim today. I hope the fact that he's related to my wife, Janet, will not raise the specter of nepotism. Also, Sasha Bergstrasser, who's been instrumental in making everything come together. And finally, it's a real joy to be reunited with my colleague and partner in crime, Father Dennis McManus. I wanted to say that before he speaks. I might not feel the same way when he's done. And of course, I want to offer my congratulations to St. Leo University for the 25th anniversary of the center, and really to congratulate everybody in this community who has supported this institution and who has brought it to this joyous occasion, as we say. This is really, really important work, and I'm thrilled to be associated with it. The title of my presentation is Why Catholic-Jewish Relations Matter Today. Implicit in the word today is a challenge. I assume that everyone in this room agrees that Jewish-Catholic relations matter. Many others in both our communities and beyond might indeed wonder, are they still talking about Jewish-Catholic relations? Didn't they work that stuff out already? And isn't it mostly like a European thing? And what about relations with other religious communities? Don't they matter? To some, the focus on Jewish Catholic or even Jewish Christian may seem arcane or irrelevant. It might have been important once, but is it still important today? As has already been mentioned, Jews and Catholics have been talking for a long time, though not in the broad scope of history. In 2025, 2 years and 2 days from this evening, we will observe the 60th anniversary of Nostra Aetate. And over those 60 years, there has been great, I would say, monumental progress and achievement and coming together. But, and this will surprise no one, there is much that remains to be done. Among the issues that I have been thinking about a lot recently are the persistence of anti-Jewish images and rhetoric in Catholic teaching and preaching, and the unanswered questions from the pontificate of Pius XII. The controversy surrounding Pope Pius XII and his beatification, specifically what he did or did not do or say or know and when, is understandably highly charged. The archives from Pope Pius's papacy were sealed, as is common practice, for 70 years following his death in 1958, preventing researchers from examining the records and leaving supporters and detractors to argue based on a paucity of hard data. For years, historians and Jewish organizations have been asking for the archives to be opened. I've been part of those efforts. In 2020, Pope Francis ordered the archives to be open. His Holiness famously said, "We are not afraid of history." Now that's an interesting and I would say a brave phrase, because it contains within it an acknowledgement that the researchers might well discover uncomfortable or embarrassing or even damning information, and so be it. I had the opportunity to participate in the conference that was just mentioned, the conference in Rome, New Documents from the Pontificate of Pope Pius XII and Their Meaning for Jewish-Christian Relations. This conference was organized and sponsored, as has been mentioned, by a number of Jewish and Catholic institutions, among them the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, Israel's Yad Vashem, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, American Jewish Committee, and the Center for Catholic Jewish Studies at St. Leo University. As was mentioned, only a small fraction of the documents in the apostolic archives in Rome, not to mention millions more in other archives around the world, have been studied. This is the work of decades. There is much we still do not know. The documents examined so far, however, have provided new information about the heroic efforts of some Catholics to save Jews, but also evidence of what can only be described as moral failure. We should not be afraid of history, and the Church should be commended for enabling and supporting this research. In terms of the persistence of anti-Jewish rhetoric, my teacher and mentor, Rabbi Dr. Michael Signer, Zichrono Livracha, of blessed memory, used to say that the Vatican, beginning with Nostra Aetate, and as laid out in subsequent documents and papal pronouncements, has made the most important clarifications regarding the place of Jews and Judaism within official Catholic teaching. The remaining challenge, he believed, is the dissemination of this teaching and its embodiment in Catholic preaching and catechesis. Now, this is easier said than done. My Catholic friends who are involved in the dialogue regularly complain about the awful anti-Jewish things they hear in homilies. Not in this diocese, I'm sure. The negative images of Jews and Judaism that became deeply embedded in Christian culture over 2 millennia are continually being recycled. This is especially in the case in the interpretation of New Testament texts, where contrasting Jesus to his fellow Jews and their traditions is a common hermeneutic in which the Jews and our tradition itself serve as a useful negative foil for everything that is good and true about Jesus and his message. The opposite is found about the Jews. I've seen this in the pages of the Vatican News. Even Pope Francis, who is certainly a friend of the Jewish people, has been known to make references in homilies that rely on these tropes. The only solution to the challenge is to raise awareness through education. And I note that my colleague, a member of the Scholarly Advisory Board, Professor Amy Jill Levine, published an article in Italian in L'Osservatore Romano this summer listing some of the most common examples. So there is education that is going on. From a Jewish perspective, ideally, Nostra Aetate and all that has flowed from it would be an integral part of the curriculum at all levels of Catholic education, especially at seminaries where priests are formed, but also for teachers and so forth. I and my colleagues who are involved in this work are concerned at the number of educated Catholics we meet who have never heard of, let alone studied any of these documents. Now, it is a bit, as we say in Latin, chutzpahdik, for a Jew to stand here and suggest that the Church could do a better job of teaching about the Second Vatican Council and Nostra Aetate. And I recognize that this is not simple. Seminaries have to teach scripture, homiletics, pastoral counseling, ethics, theology, canon law, and so forth. Getting this on the radar screen of the local administration of the seminaries, let alone making it a priority, is a heavy lift, especially in parts of the world where there are no established Jewish communities to make it seem local and relevant. In this regard, I want to mention another conference also held in Rome, this time in 2019, on the topic of Jesus and the Pharisees, Professor Levine and Dr. Sievers, who were already mentioned, were instrumental in that. This conference was, like the conference on the Vatican archives, sponsored by both Catholic and Jewish institutions. The Pope addressed the conference, lending his authority to the significance of the proceedings. Leading Jewish and Christian scholars from around the world came together to explore current thinking about who the Pharisees really were and how they had been interpreted or misinterpreted and exploited in Christian interpretation to the detriment of the Jewish community. They produced a top-notch scholarly volume, but how, as Rabbi Signer suggested, does this information reach the parish priest who was preparing a homily for Sunday morning? If they were all like me when I was in the congregation, they were probably doing it late Saturday night. There's a complicating factor. Over the last 60 years, a positive image of Jews and Judaism, at least contemporary Jews and Judaism, has increasingly become part of Catholic culture. It stands to reason that the repeated reference by Catholic leaders to Jewish brothers and sisters, the many images of popes and rabbis embracing, popes at synagogues, popes at the Western Wall, at the Kotel, popes at Auschwitz, and so many examples on the local level, among them, again, the center at St. Leo, has and continues to change the perception of present-day Jews among many Catholics for the better. I believe that some of those who continue to use outdated stereotypes about the Pharisees or about the law and other aspects of first-century Judaism are doing so because there's a disconnect between their positive view of their Jewish neighbors and how they think and have been trained to think about Jesus' interlocutors in the Gospels, such as the Pharisees, as well as the Jewish world from which Jesus emerged. On more than one occasion, when challenging a problematic reference, we are told that this has nothing to do with modern Jews, it's all about antiquity. But the use of negative image of scriptural Jews perpetuates anti-Jewish attitudes today and has implications far beyond the Catholic community. An unintended consequence of the relative success of transforming the image of contemporary Jews among Catholics today, as compared to the difficulty of rooting out the ingrained image of Jesus' opponents in both tradition and scholarship, has led to this disconnect. And I note that Dr. Levine's article, which I referenced in L'Osservatore Romano, was titled, "On Relations Between Catholics and Jews, Unintentional Anti-Semitism." Another aspect of this disconnect is in the use of language. Here the concept of triggering can be instructive. That is, causing someone emotional distress by arousing feelings or memories associated with a particular traumatic experience. When Jews hear certain phrases or words, it can trigger an immediate, visceral, emotional response, regardless of the intention of the theoretical framework behind the words. A better understanding of this dynamic, raising awareness of Jewish sensitivities to certain words and ideas, would help preachers and teachers to be more careful about the language they use. I earlier referred to the fact that there are parts of the Catholic world where there are no Jews, some of which are significant areas of growth for the church. Why should a Catholic living in Africa or in Asia need to learn about the history of Catholic anti-Judaism, its relationship to the Shoah, and its relevance to today? I've been told more than once that this is a European problem, more pointedly, a white European problem. I recently spent 3 weeks teaching at Holy Trinity College in Harare, Zimbabwe. I've taught there a couple of times with two sisters of Zion, Sister Dr. Kasia Kowalska from Poland, and the Eternal Light Award recipient of 2020, Sister Dr. Celia Deutsch. And in our discussions, the question was raised, why does it matter for the African context that Jesus was a Jew? I propose 3 reasons. First, it is impossible to understand Jesus and the New Testament without understanding the first century Jewish context. That, it would seem to me, would be relevant to all Catholics, regardless of where they live. Second, Africans and other non-Europeans received their Christianity primarily from white Europeans, and along with it, the anti-Judaism that was embedded in it. Unless Catholics, regardless of their origins, become aware of and sensitive to that history, they risk unwittingly perpetuating those attitudes. Finally, non-Europeans must consider that the attitude that white European colonialists had, and some still have, to indigenous cultures and traditions, and their resulting treatment by those colonialists emerge in part from their attitudes towards Jews as emblematic as the inferior other. As Willie James Jennings has shown, supersessionism and racism are intimately linked. I've been arguing that Jewish-Catholic relations matter today because the work of eliminating anti-Judaism from the church is far from over. I mentioned two conferences, one on the Apostolic Archives and the other on the Pharisees, and I want to underscore what I think is extraordinarily significant. Both conferences were sponsored by Jewish and Catholic institutions and featured Jews and Catholics working together on a shared project. I also mentioned L'Osservatore Romano published an article by A.J. Levine, and places like the Catholic Theological Union, where I taught, and St. Leo, and many other Jewish and Catholic scholars are working together and learning together and building a new dynamic. I would be remiss and quite rude if I were to focus on challenges facing the church without at least asking whether there is work to be done on the Jewish side as well. I pointed out the challenges that remain in Catholic education about post-conciliar Jewish-Catholic relations. By the same token, we need to ask what is being taught in Jewish seminaries and what is being taught to Jewish teachers. Are they learning about the transformation in the Catholic Church since 1965? Can a rabbi be ordained without knowing about Nostra Aetate? Do day school students learn about blood libel and the Inquisition, but not about Pope Francis and Rabbi Abraham Skorka? Now, there is great stuff being done, but in the Jewish world as well, there's much more that needs to be done. Now, I debated with myself, given what was going on, whether I should include this next paragraph, but I'm going to anyway because I think it must be said. A particularly troubling phenomenon over the past few years has occurred in Israel, where there's been a significant, and I would say sickening, increase in Jewish vandalism against Christian, including Catholic institutions, arson at the Church of the Multiplication in the Galilee, vandalism at the Church of the Dormition in Jerusalem, and the recent desecration of an Anglican cemetery. These are just a few examples. And there's been physical violence as well, including a spate of incidents in which Haredi ultra-Orthodox Jews spit at Christians, or worse. Now, some of this is attributable to the rise of national rhetoric and fervor in Israeli politics. One factor that must be considered is that with the founding of the State of Israel in 1948, Jews, for the first time in almost 2,000 years, found themselves wielding political power over religious and ethnic minorities, including Christians. While there have been some negative ideas about Christians in the Jewish tradition for centuries, these negative ideas, with rare exception, didn't lead to violence due to Jewish political powerlessness. Now it seems a small number of Jews in Israel feel that they have impunity. This represents a fringe element in Israeli society, and I believe in some ways is also part of the broader phenomenon of national populism we see in other parts of the world as well. The vast majority of both Israeli religious leaders, including Haredi ultra-Orthodox religious leaders and political leaders, condemn this, but it's a real problem. It's an embarrassment, and it needs to be addressed. So yes, Jewish-Catholic relations matter today. They matter because when we engage the religious other in dialogue and learning, it results not only in increased knowledge, understanding, and respect, but often also leads to a deeper understanding and appreciation of our own tradition, perhaps even insights that could only emerge from such an encounter. Finally, Jewish-Catholic relations matter because Jews and Catholics share the values that are fundamental to our shared scriptures. To paraphrase Dabru Emet, Jews and Catholics must work together for justice and peace. Jews and Catholics, each in their own way, recognize the unredeemed state of the world as reflected in the persistence of persecution, poverty, and human degradation and misery. Although justice and peace are finally God's, our joint efforts, together with those of other faith communities, will help bring the sovereignty of God for which both traditions long. Separately and together, we must work to bring justice and peace to our world. The idea of Jews and Catholics working together to bring justice and peace to the world would have been unimaginable only a few decades ago. Now it's not only imaginable, it's happening. Misunderstanding, hatred, and fear are being replaced by friendship and trust. This should be celebrated and can serve as an example to the world that desperately needs it, that past enmity can be overcome. St. Leo University has, for a quarter of a century, undertaken this sacred task of tikkun, of repair. And I congratulate you for all that you have done. May you go from strength to strength. And again, my deepest thanks for honoring me with the Eternal Light Award. Thank you.
I now want to briefly introduce Father Dennis McManus, who will offer a response to Rabbi Sandmel's remarks. After Father McManus concludes his response, Rabbi Sandmel will have a brief chance to return to the podium, where we will then open up turn to the Eternal Light Award ceremony. Father Dennis McManus is a professor of dogmatics at St. Patrick's Seminary and University. He is also the consultant for Jewish affairs for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Will you please join me in welcoming Father Dennis McManus?
Thank you, Dr. Tapey, for your introduction and the welcome made to all of us this evening, joining together to salute Rabbi David, not only on this happy occasion of your 25th anniversary celebration for the Center for Jewish Studies, but because of awarding Rabbi David this well-deserved recognition. Rabbi David, we are all delighted for you, as your life of service has symbolized the best of what Catholic-Jewish relations can be. Bishop Parks, I thank you also for your presence as the head of the local church. It's in your person that the Jewish community of Tampa sees the light of friendship and of the future. You continue where your predecessor, Bishop Robert Lynch, left off in his very warm relations with the Jews in the Diocese of Tampa, St. Pete. We're grateful to see how both of you, a rabbi and a bishop, represent the kind of interaction and appreciation that Jews and Catholics can at last hope for in a world that is so often dark. I would be remiss in not acknowledging Rabbi Sir or Sir Rabbi. Rabbi Sir Dr. James Rudin, co-founder of the CCJS at St. Leo's. Rabbi Jim is a walking history of the last 50 years of Catholic Jewish struggle and progress. I'm so grateful that his contribution to this center is readily acknowledged by his always gracious and joyful presence, which we miss this evening. Rabbi David Sandmel and I have known each other for at least 15 years, partnering together in national programs to address anti-Semitism, especially in Catholic schools. But I believe, Rabbi, we met even before our joint work with the Anti-Defamation League, when year after year in the National Council of Synagogues and the USCCB dialogues, we reached out to educate and solve problems amongst all levels of leadership. Those dialogues, those same dialogues in which we spent so much time, have really stretched out over 50 years in one form or another. Your contributions to those meetings, Rabbi, were immensely important to us as Catholics, helping us to see with an uncommon clarity what it means to be Jewish in American culture. You and I also owe a great debt to our predecessors, Rabbi Rudin and Dr. Eugene Fisher. May I thank them both for their lifetimes of unselfish service, first in establishing the dialogue between our communities in the U.S., and then to seeing it through from one crisis to the next, one achievement to the next, and tonight from one reunion to the next. Rabbi Sandmel and I are the lucky successors of the great men and women who have made possible a new relationship we now enjoy. Rabbi David is truly his father's son, a brilliant, scholarly, gracious, warm, prayerful, deeply spiritual rabbi, ready to deal with problems head on, as you just heard. How many times, Rabbi David, did you and I burn up the phone lines at night and early in the morning, finding solutions to the conflicts that confronted both of our communities before they were completely out of control? As I recall, we always managed to improve difficult situations, which had somehow arisen because one or another of our colleagues had missed the mark. I remember our shared moniker when it came to the practical side of Catholic-Jewish relations. We used to say to each other, our friendship is the net under the net of Catholic-Jewish relations. If it wasn't for the fact that Rabbi David could call Father Dennis at any hour and discuss whatever it was in front of us, I think many a sticky problem would have gotten much worse. It's a testament that friendship between two who are problem-solving and enjoy the same company can make all the difference between our communities. I could not be more proud than to have that friendship with you and to thank you for it this evening. I know also that many bishops in the U.S. appreciate your skills as an educator. In the Bearing Witness program of the USCCB and the ADL, you and I traveled across the U.S. year after year to help thousands of Catholic educators learn how to understand the teachings of Nostra Aetate and to apply them in the classrooms of both grade schools and high schools. We discovered together what slow learners Catholics can be and how tightly some hold on to old prejudices. I always enjoyed the remark that Catholic teachers made to you after our joint readings of the Gospel of Luke. How many of them said this, "Oh, Rabbi, you are the first rabbi I have ever met," also the first Jew. And to see a rabbi and a priest read the Christian scriptures together has made all the difference to me as a Catholic. Then they would turn to me and say, "When can the rabbi come back?" They never asked if I was coming back. I should be a rabbi. Why would I do this? Just recently, one of our former students called me on a completely unrelated matter, and in the course of our conversation, not realizing who she was talking to, asked if I would remember you, Rabbi Sandmel, for your wit and insight as you presented alongside with, quote, some priest whose name I don't recall from the bishops' conference. She said it was a life-changing day for her, allowing her to admit and admire, to learn and to love the Judaism of Jesus and of every Jew. Our friendship fits into a broader pattern, though, of the last part of the 20th century, between priests and rabbis and popes and rabbis, too. I recall the visit of Pope Benedict XVI to Washington, D.C. in, I think it was 2008, where we had a large interreligious gathering. 56 rabbis, 57 imams, and in the front row, 2 by 2 like Noah's Ark, 2 Buddhists, 2 Jains, 2 Sikhs, 2 this, 2 animists, 2 that. During the course of the Pope's remarks, I received a scribbled note from one of his secretaries that said, "The Holy Father wants to meet Rabbi Jacob Neusner personally right after this talk. Find him." So I looked and I found Rabbi Neusner. And I said to him, "The Holy Father would like to meet you." And he just stared at me. "Why?" he said. "We've never met." "Exactly, but he would like to meet you. Would you and Mrs. Neusner be kind enough?" "Sure, yeah." Right. So at the end, I pulled the Holy Father aside in very bad German, "Mein heiligen Papst bitte, Dr. Rabin." And Benedict turned to me and said, "Speak English." Yeah. And I introduced him as Rabbi Neusner. And this is what the Pope said: "I have never heard a Pope speak this way. I don't know if any spoke this way ever before Benedict spoke this way to Jacob Neusner." He said, "I have wanted to meet you for several years. I read the little book you wrote, A Rabbi Speaks with Jesus. And I have to tell you something. You have taught me more about Jesus as a Jew and a rabbi than any book I have ever read or any rabbi I have ever spoken to. You opened up for me an understanding of Jesus like none other, and I want to thank you for that." Well, I was stunned to hear. When is the last time the Pope of Rome thanked the rabbi? It's just astonishing to hear that. And I think, Rabbi David, if I was to write a book, it would be A Rabbi Talks with Father Dennis. And the same gratitude that Benedict showed toward Rabbi Neusner, I would have for you. The way that you open up when you co-read, when we read together a text, it could be Hebrew or Christian scriptures, the way you open it up, the way you help us to see, that is such a gift to us. We thank you for that. But tonight, our friendship, I think, is more precious than ever, set against the backdrop of the barbaric Hamas invasion of Israel from nearly 3 weeks ago. Calculated, as it seems to me, to awaken the wounds of the Holocaust, the Hamas militia stormed into Jewish settlements with a brutality unseen for decades. The Catholic Church and bishops of this country condemn such actions without reservation. There is no justification for choices such as these. The suffering of the Palestinian people was triggered by Hamas. We join with Pope Francis in calling on the aggressors to cease their advance against innocent lives and to provide immediate relief for their victims. But most of all, we need you to know, Rabbi David, that we stand with you in the public square. We stand with you this night and all nights to come. And we stand with you, most importantly, heart to heart, where we see Jewish suffering and offer to do what we can to relieve it. As followers of Jesus, we call out evil when and where it rises. And as your brothers and sisters, we oppose the forces that attack you, both as Jews and as our friends. Many of us tonight hope that you will see our resolve in this most important test of our teshuvah, our conversion. That is, in our refusal to repeat the harm done to you by so many Christians in ages past, when the cowardly temptation to desert you against the monster of anti-Semitism overcame our consciences even to our own condemnation. John Paul prayed as every Catholic when he prayed at the Western Wall during the millennial year of 2000. You remember his words, quote, "God of our fathers, you chose Abraham and his descendants to bring your name to the nations. We are deeply saddened by the behavior of those who in the course of history have caused these children of yours to suffer, and asking your forgiveness, we wish to commit ourselves to genuine brotherhood with the people of the covenant. Amen." May our celebration with you tonight, Rabbi David, in some small way, echo John Paul's prayer of conversion. We ask you to accept our thanks for the many ways that you have made our teshuvah possible. Congratulations, and thank you for so often being our first rabbi. Amen.
We will now transition to the final segment of our program where we recognize Rabbi Sandmel with the Eternal Light Award. Since 1999, the Eternal Light Award is given to a scholar who has made outstanding contributions to Jewish-Catholic relations. The recipient is chosen each December by the Center for Catholic Jewish Studies' Scholarly Advisory Board. Dr. Sandmel, it is our honor to bestow upon you, on behalf of the Scholarly Advisory Board of the Center for Catholic Jewish Studies, the Eternal Light Award. The award reads, quote, "For your lifelong commitment to the study of Jewish and Christian scriptures, Christian-Jewish relations, and promoting mutual understanding and respect between Christians and Jews throughout the world," end quote. Would you please join me in showing appreciation for the outstanding contributions of Rabbi David Sandmel to Catholic Jewish relations.
Well, again, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tapey. Thank you, Father Dennis. I want to pick up on a word that Father Dennis used several times, the word friendship. And for me, that is central to the work that I do and the work that we are all doing. When I can call somebody a friend, when I can trust that person, when I know that I can pick up the phone in the middle of the night and call, that to me is the epitome of what we're trying to do here. Yes, we can have professional relationships, we can have academic relationships, but really when we have personal friendships, when we care what goes on in somebody's life, with their families, with their communities, that to me is the core of reconciliation, of what we have been working on. I'm going to share a very brief story. I won't even tell you the whole story. I'll just tell you a little bit of it. Father Dennis made a brief reference to my father of blessed memory, Samuel Sandmel, who was a pioneer in post-World War II Jewish-Christian relations, a biblical scholar, wrote many volumes on the New Testament and so forth. He was the child of immigrants to this country from what is now the Ukraine. And there was an occasion we were living in Cincinnati, and my grandfather was living in St. Louis, and he took the train to Cincinnati to visit us, and my father welcomed at the train station, said, "Would you like to go see a play tonight? They're doing a production of Tevye and His Daughters." Now, Tevye and His Daughters were the stories by Sholem Aleichem that ended up being the musical Fiddler on the Roof. My grandfather loved Sholem Aleichem. My father neglected to mention that the play was being put on at the local Catholic women's college that had a fabulous drama department. And they walk into the theater, and they're standing in the foyer, and my grandfather looks around, and he sees priests in collars and nuns in habit, and he says, his immediate reaction was fear. "Why did you bring me here? Get me out of here." Before my father could respond, some of those priests and nuns came over and greeted him warmly. They were friends. My grandfather was convinced to stay. He enjoyed the production. But my point here is friendship and what in a very short period of time had transpired and completely reoriented the relationship. So let's continue to grow our friendship. Let's continue to support institutions like this that provide the foundation for growing friendships. And let's be grateful that we're able to see the fruit of this work in our day. Thank you.